Welcome to the Legio Veritas YouTube channel. In today's video, I am going to do a deep dive into the murder of French television producer Sophie Toscan du Plantier. Sophie was born in Paris on the 28th of July 1957 to parents Georges and Marguerite. As a young girl, she was described by her friends as being very strong-willed and independent, whilst also possessing an innate kindness and a selfless attitude. At the age of 22, Sophie married Pierre-John Baudy and soon fell pregnant. She had a son named Pierre-Louis. Not long after Pierre-Louis' birth, Sophie and her husband divorced. She moved into an apartment with her son and worked hard to provide for both of them. She eventually met French film producer Daniel Toscan du Plantier. Daniel was a wealthy man and a powerful figure in the French film industry. Eventually they married and Sophie became Daniel's third wife. In 1993, Daniel purchased a remote cottage for Sophie in Dunmanus West, an isolated area in County Cork, Ireland. Sophie was very drawn to the rugged yet beautiful landscape in West Cork. As a woman who valued her solitude, she visited and stayed in the cottage frequently, most of the time with friends or family, although Daniel only ever stayed in the cottage on one occasion. On the 20th of December 1996, Sophie made the last-minute decision to board a flight destined for Cork. She arrived in Cork that afternoon and hired a rental car, a silver Ford Fiesta. The Fiesta parked outside of Sophie's cottage that evening and she settled in for the night. On the 21st of December, Sophie was spotted in Spa by a witness around 2:30 p.m. I will reveal why this is relevant later on. By the time evening came, her car was spotted back at her cottage. On the 22nd of December, Sophie visited the old fort, 3 Castle Head. After her visit to the castle, she visited some friends, a French couple who lived nearby. She revealed to this couple that she had felt an unexplained and ominous feeling whilst walking near the castle. This is particularly eerie as the area surrounding the castle is said to be haunted by a spectre known as the White Lady. Seeing her, according to local folklore, is apparently an omen of bad luck or even death. After visiting her friends, she visited O'Sullivan's bar in Crookhaven before returning home to her cottage. At 10:30 p.m. that night, she calls Daniel and tells him she will be returning home on Christmas Eve. The call ends at 11:30 p.m. At 10 a.m. on Monday the 23rd of December, Sophie's neighbour, Shirley Foster, is on her way to take some rubbish to the local landfill. As her car approaches the gate at the bottom of her laneway, she is met with a gruesome sight. The body of a woman, still wearing night clothes, lay tangled in the briars beside the gate. Terrified, Shirley abandons her car and rushes back to her home to inform her husband Alfie of what she has discovered. Alfie calls the Gardaí, the Irish version of the police force. The Gardaí arrive approximately 40 minutes later. They notice that the deceased woman is still wearing night clothes as well as a pair of boots. She has been horrifically brutalised and a concrete block and a rock are found placed beside the body. The body is identified as Sophie's by her housekeeper's husband that afternoon. Tragically, the state pathologist could not get to the crime scene until the following day, meaning that the time of death could not be accurately determined. Sophie's family, back home in France, received the tragic news that evening. The crime sent shockwaves through not just Ireland, but also France. West Cork was a very quiet and peaceful area, and crimes of this magnitude did not happen there. Suspicion initially fell on Daniel, who provided a rock-solid alibi. Sophie's family never believed that Daniel had anything to do with her death. They were described as being very much in love with each other by their friends. It came to light that Sophie had been involved with a man named Bruno Carbonet while she had been married to Daniel, although she had broken off the affair sometime before her death. When questioned, however, he too had a solid alibi. The Gardaí got their first big breakthrough on the 11th of January 1997. A woman calling herself Fiona calls the Gardaí from a phone box and informs them that she had seen a man at Kilfodder Bridge at approximately 4 a.m. whilst out driving with a male friend. Kilfodder Bridge was just a stone's throw away from Sophie's cottage. She claims that the man had been wearing a long black coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and had appeared to have been stumbling. After a televised appeal by the Gardaí for Fiona to get in touch, she rang again. This time, however, the call would be traced to a house. The caller was identified as Marie Farrell. 4 days after the guards had traced Fiona's call, they paid Marie Farrell a visit. Marie confirmed to them that she was indeed Fiona, and she agreed to help, although she would not give them the identity of her male companion who had accompanied her on her late-night drive. She gave the Gardaí exactly what they were hoping for: a positive identification of the man she had seen at Kilfodder Bridge. The name of that man was Ian Bailey. Ian Kenneth Bailey was born on the 27th of January 1957 in Manchester, England. After leaving school, he worked as a freelance journalist in Cheltenham and got married to fellow journalist Sarah Limbrick. After 5 years as husband and wife, the marriage failed. Wanting a fresh start, Bailey relocated to Ireland, eventually settling in West Cork. Bailey was described by locals as a striking and imposing figure. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches tall, with a powerful build and a bombastic personality, he often annoyed the local publicans by calling the pub to order whilst he recited poems written by himself. In 1992, Bailey met his long-term partner, Jules Thomas. They became an item, and Bailey moved into her homestead, the Prairie Cottage. The Prairie was approximately a 15-minute drive away from where Sophie's cottage was located. The day before Sophie's body was found, the 22nd of December, Bailey was spotted by his partner, Jules Thomas, returning home after a night of drinking at around 2:15 p.m. They went into town around 9 p.m. that evening and were seen drinking in the local pub. They were the last to leave at around 12:30 a.m. On the way home, Jules stated that Bailey, who was driving, made an unexpected stop at Hunt Hill, which overlooks the valley towards Dunmanus West. Bailey was initially drawn to the full moon before asking Jules if a light across the valley was Alfie Lyon's house. Alfie was Sophie's neighbour. Jules then claimed that Bailey had said that he had a weird feeling that something bad was going to happen near Alfie's house. Jules told Ian to get back into the car, and they returned home to the Prairie cottage. At 1:40 p.m. on the 23rd of December, Ian Bailey received a call from Eddie Cassidy, a correspondent from the Irish Examiner newspaper, informing him that there had been a murder of a female foreign national in the Tormore area. Tormore is a large area divided into 13 smaller townlands. At 2:20 p.m, Bailey, alongside Jules Thomas, is seen driving towards Sophie's cottage in Dunmanus West. He is intercepted by a member of the Gardaí before he reaches the scene of the murder. Bailey tells the guard that he is on assignment, but he is dismissed. The guard who intercepted Bailey noted that Bailey gave virtually no pushback, which seemed out of character for him. Bailey returned home and began writing his first story on the case. On the 24th of December, the day after the murder, Bailey goes to a local shop to pick up supplies. The shopkeeper noted that Bailey looked rough and that he had heavy scratching on his hands. On Christmas Day, 1996, Bailey is seen attending the annual school swim. While there, he is approached by a woman with a video camera who asks him to recite a poem. Bailey recites a poem and shakes hands with the woman, who noticed that he had heavy scratching on his hands. On the 26th of December, a neighbour walking past the Prairie studio notices a bonfire at the back of the Prairie studio. Bailey wrote several articles in the aftermath of the murder and seemed to have very intimate knowledge of the crime scene. On the 28th of December, he wrote an article stating that Sophie had hair in her hands and that she had fought desperately, scratching her attacker. This was just 3 days after the post-mortem. He also wrote articles suggesting that a hitman and Sophie's husband or one of her ex-lovers were involved. In the preceding weeks following Sophie's tragic death, several witnesses reported Ian Bailey to the Gardaí, claiming that he had confessed to the crime. One witness was a 14-year-old boy who Bailey was giving a lift home to. The young man asked Bailey how things were, to which Bailey allegedly responded by saying, "Things were a lot better since he went and bashed her brains in with a rock." Deeply disturbed by what Bailey had said to him, the boy told his mother, who reported it to the Gardaí. A couple who had been drinking with Ian and Jules had agreed to go back to the Prairie for afters. Bailey, who was very drunk, allegedly broke down into tears before saying, I did it, I went too far." The couple were so disturbed by what they had heard that they left the Prairie, despite it being the early hours of the morning. On the 10th of February 1997, Ian Bailey and Jules Thomas were arrested and brought in for questioning by An Garda Síochána for the murder of Sophie Toscan du Plantier. No physical evidence was found during the search of the Prairie, aside from the remnants of a recent bonfire behind the Prairie studio. Amongst the ashes were the remains of a mattress, buttons from a jacket, and fragments from a pair of boots. The Gardaí had arrested Bailey primarily on Marie Farrell's testimony, in which she stated that she had seen Bailey at the Cailfodder Bridge on the night of Sophie's death. She claimed that Bailey appeared to be in a drunken state and had looked like he had been washing his face. She also claimed that Sophie had been in her shop on the Saturday, the weekend of the murder, and that she had also seen Bailey outside of her shop on the same Saturday. This is particularly interesting because the witness who had seen Sophie leaving Spa on the same Saturday also claimed that she had seen Ian Bailey across the road from Spa, and that he had walked away in the same direction as Sophie. Bailey denied any involvement with the killing and claimed that he had been in bed all night. Jules Thomas initially corroborated Bailey's version of events. However, after intense questioning, she went on to claim that Ian had in fact left the bed and that she didn't see him again until he brought her coffee the following morning. She also stated that he had a fresh scratch on his forehead that she hadn't seen before. Upon learning that his lover had contradicted his version of events, Bailey changed his story. Bailey told the Gardaí that he had in fact gotten out of bed. He claimed that after getting into bed, he had remembered that he had an article that he needed to complete. He left the Prairie cottage and walked down to the Prairie studio to work on his article. When questioned about the scratches on his hands and his forehead, he claimed that he had gotten them cutting down Christmas trees and killing turkeys. When asked whether or not he knew Sophie, Bailey said that he had never met her, and that he had only ever seen her once through the kitchen window of her cottage when Alfie Lyons, Sophie's neighbour, had pointed her out to him. This contradicts what Alfie told the Gardaí. Alfie said that he was 90% certain that he had formally introduced them. Other witnesses had also claimed that Bailey had told them that he had met Sophie several times. When grilled by the Gardaí on the numerous confessions that he had made, Bailey claimed that he was using black humour and being ironic. After the questioning was over, Jules Thomas signed off on several statements that she made, including ones where she said that it is possible that Bailey could have taken her car without her knowledge, and another where she said that there is strong evidence linking Ian Bailey to the murder. Bailey gave the guards a sample of his blood, fingerprints and hair before he was released. After his release, Bailey alleged that both he and Jules Thomas were threatened and intimidated by the Gardaí, both on the way to the station and inside it. The Gardaí have always denied this. In September 1997, files are given to the DPP, but they refuse to charge, citing a lack of physical evidence. In January 1998, Bailey is arrested for a second time, but once again he is released without charge. The case goes cold, and for several years it fades from the public's mind. This is until 2003, when Bailey shockingly brought a libel case against 8 newspapers, claiming that they had defamed his character and ruined his life. This case proved to be disastrous for Bailey, as details of his vicious assaults against Jules Thomas came to light. In one assault, Bailey had bitten Jules, torn out chunks of her hair, blackened her eyes, and severely damaged her lip. Bailey's diaries, which had been seized from the Prairie cottage, were also used as evidence against him. Bailey had written about his assaults on Jules, and even wrote that he was actually trying to kill her. He had also wrote that he was a beast walking on 2 legs. The judge ruled against Bailey, stating that he would have no hesitation in describing him as violent towards women, plural. Marie Farrell claimed during this libel trial that Bailey had begun a campaign of harassment against her. She stated that Bailey would park his car outside of her shop and on occasion had made cutthroat gestures towards her in an attempt to intimidate her. Bailey denied Farrell's claims. In 2007, Bailey would sue the state of Ireland for wrongful arrest. In November 2014, Bailey versus the Irish state would commence. In a shocking turn of events, Marie Farrell would switch sides and she retracted her former statements about seeing Bailey at Kilfodder Bridge. She also claimed that her statements about Bailey harassing her were complete fabrications. She alleged that she had been coerced by the Gardaí into making false allegations against Ian Bailey. She entered the witness box and when asked to identify the man who had been in the car with her on the night of the murder, she refused. When pressured by the judge, she dramatically stormed out of the courtroom. Eventually she returned, but the damage was done, and the jury ruled that she was an unreliable witness who had constantly contradicted herself over the years. Bailey had lost his star witness, and subsequently, he lost the trial. He was ordered to pay legal fees numbering in the millions, which of course he couldn't afford. In 2019, the French authorities brought their own trial against Ian Bailey, which was to be held in Paris. The Irish state refused to extradite Bailey, and the trial took place in absentia. The French court ruled that Bailey was indeed guilty of the murder of Sophie. This created a bizarre situation where Bailey was a convicted murderer in France, yet was regarded as an innocent man in Ireland. Bear in mind that the Irish DPP had ruled that there was not enough evidence for a trial against him in Ireland. The Irish refused to extradite Bailey. This allowed him to remain a free man in Ireland, but unable to leave the country out of fear of arrest. In 2021, Bailey and his long-term girlfriend Jules Thomas separated, and Bailey left the Prairie Cottage. In 2024, after a string of health problems, Bailey collapsed on a street close to his rented apartment and passed away due to heart-related issues. Despite a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence linking Ian Bailey to Sophie's death, no physical evidence was ever found that could prove that Ian Bailey had murdered Sophie. Considering how brutal and frenzied Sophie's death had been, it is very surprising that the killer never left any DNA evidence behind. Bailey had willingly provided the guards with samples of his hair, his blood, and his fingerprints. This has caused some to doubt Bailey's involvement. A former British soldier by the name of Martin Graham gave an interview to the Irish Mirror in 2014. He claimed that the Gardaí had offered to supply him with cannabis if he managed to get close to Ian Bailey. According to Graham, he cooperated with the guards and he approached Bailey at the Prairie Cottage. Allegedly, the guards had hoped that Bailey would trust Graham and perhaps say something to him. Graham claims that he brought the cannabis supplied by the Gardaí around to Ian Bailey, and that it wasn't long before Bailey realised what was going on. Graham alleges that when the Gardaí realised that Bailey had figured out their ploy, they picked Graham up, drove him out to the countryside, and threatened him. Graham claims that he was so frightened by the incident that he fled to the UK. Graham isn't the only person to have made accusations against the Gardaí, accusing them of attempting to frame Ian Bailey. Marie Farrell had also accused Gardaí of coercing her into making false allegations against Bailey. One theory that has been thrown around is that Sophie had been murdered by a retired guard, who she had been having an affair with. The proponents of this theory claim that this is why Bailey has been the only real suspect connected to the murder, and that the guards are using him as a scapegoat to protect one of their own. The Gardaí have also been accused of losing the 7-foot-long iron gate that had been at the bottom of Sophie's driveway, where her body was discovered. It has been suggested by some that the gate was lost deliberately to hide evidence. This, however, has been debunked, as the gate was never lost. After the Gardaí had retrieved all of the evidence that they could from it, they offered it back to Sophie's family, who refused to take it. The gate was subsequently destroyed. Some people still believe that there is a French connection to Sophie's death, and that the Gardaí were too quick in ruling out Sophie's husband Daniel as a suspect. They claim that Daniel may have sought revenge for Sophie's infidelity and hired a hitman to kill her. Despite the evidence pointing towards an unplanned, frenzied attack due to the murder weapons being a concrete block and a rock, those who believe the hitman theory suggest that these weapons were used deliberately to give the illusion that the murder was unplanned and was committed by a local. I want to start by saying that this is a case that I have done a huge amount of research on. I've watched the Netflix documentary, the Sky documentary, I've listened to the West Cork podcast, I've watched Jim Sheridan's new movie called Recreation, and I've read the book by Senan Molony called Sophie, the Final Verdict. This is a case that I've gone back and forth on since I first saw the Netflix documentary back in 2021. Now, in 2025, after diligently exploring as many different lines of thought as I could, I can positively say that I am about 95% certain that Ian Bailey did in fact murder Sophie Toscan du Plantier. This is just my opinion, of course, and without a confession or DNA evidence, we can never be 100% sure. That being said, I feel like the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. Let's go through it quickly. He had no alibi. He knew where to go immediately after being told nothing more than that a foreign female had been killed in the Tormore area, a large area consisting of 13 different townlands which was home to many foreign females. He went straight to the scene of the crime on what he said was a hunch, despite claiming that he didn't know Sophie. He knew intimate details about the crime before the guards had made them known publicly, and wrote about them in his articles. Several witnesses reported seeing heavy scratches on his hands in the days following the crime. He also had a wound on his forehead that his partner said that she didn't notice until the morning of the murder. A witness reported seeing a bonfire at the back of the Prairie studio just a couple of days after the murder. The guards found remnants of clothing and boots in the ashes of said bonfire on the day that they arrested him. Multiple people have come forward claiming that Bailey had confessed to the crime, many more than the two that I referenced earlier in the video. Despite claiming black humour, not one of these people believed that it was humour, and they went out of their way to report him. He changed his story from "I was in bed all night" to "I got up to write an article in the middle of the night." Several witnesses have claimed that Bailey knew Sophie, despite him claiming the contrary. He had a history of vicious, brutal assaults against his own partner Jules Thomas. He stopped randomly on Hunts Hill on the night that Sophie was murdered and told his partner Jules Thomas that he had a feeling that something bad was going to happen near Sophie's home. When you add all of this stuff up, there is just far too much circumstantial evidence for all of this to be a mere coincidence, at least in my opinion. Not to mention that many of the other theories put forth about jealous lovers and hitmen were started by Bailey himself in his articles. Having watched many Ian Bailey interviews over the years, I've never been convinced by the guy. He's always come across as somebody who loves the limelight, somebody who is dishonest, and has a very shady character. There is a video on YouTube where 4 body language experts analyse Bailey's interviews over the years, and they all come to the conclusion that he is being deceptive. If you want to see this video, it's on the Behaviour Panel's YouTube channel, and I will leave a link in the description. There is also a series of videos on the Never a Truer Word YouTube channel, where a linguistic expert analyses Bailey's statements, and he too comes to the conclusion that Bailey is being deceptive. I'll provide a link for that also. Another thing that convinces me that Bailey was capable of this horrific crime was the level of depravity that the man was capable of stooping to. Aside from brutally beating his own partner on multiple occasions and showing very little remorse for it, it came to light that Bailey also had a very deviant interest in underage girls. Jules's daughter, Ginny, accused him of making inappropriate remarks to her in 1995 when she was only 14 years old. To make matters worse, in 2022, it was revealed that Bailey had been sending very inappropriate images and messages to an underage girl. If you want to learn more about this, I suggest you get a copy of the book called The Pervert in the Hills by JP Holzer. One final thing that I feel is worth mentioning is Bailey's bizarre obsession with the moon. 2 months after Sophie's death, one of Bailey's neighbours was woken up to the sound of roaring and howling outside of her home. It was the night of the full moon, and she had her children in bed. She claims that this howling went on for several minutes and that she recognised the voice as Bailey's. He eventually left, shouting sorry as he went. Bailey also liked to track the full moon. He told people that he had been in West Cork for 64 full moons the December that Sophie died. There was a full moon in the sky the night that Sophie was murdered, and Bailey had told people on several occasions that the full moon affected him in a bizarre manner. Bailey was also known to carry a staff that he liked to call his moonstick. In an interview with journalists, Bailey claimed that locals had said that he had turned into a werewolf monster on the night of the murder because there was a full moon in the sky. The reason that I bring this up is because once again it seems like too much of a coincidence that a guy who counts and keeps track of the full moon, admits that the full moon affects him in a bizarre way, allegedly turns up outside of his neighbour's house howling and roaring on the night of a full moon, and randomly stops his car on Hunts Hill to look at the full moon before telling his partner that he had a feeling that something bad was going to happen right next to the home where a woman would later be murdered on that very same night. I'm not trying to suggest that Bailey literally turned into a werewolf, but I'm just pointing out a bizarre facet of Bailey's psychology. The manner in which Sophie was killed was rabid and bestial in nature, and from everything that has come to light about this guy, from vicious assaults on women to bizarre and erratic behaviour, I believe that it is well within the scope of Ian Bailey's capabilities to have committed such a horrific crime. Again, I want to stress that this is just my opinion. I'm not claiming to be any kind of expert. In regards to the conduct of the Gardaí throughout the investigation and the accusations of them trying to set Ian Bailey up, I do believe that there may be an element of truth to these allegations. I suspect that the Gardaí were genuinely convinced of Bailey's guilt, and in their desperation to try and solve the crime, I think that it's entirely plausible that they were willing to stoop to less than honourable methods to try and get something incriminating to stick to him. As for Martin Graham's testimony, I tend to believe that he was being truthful. It would be a completely bizarre story to make up out of thin air, and the fact that he moved countries and waited for over a decade to share his story out of supposed fear makes me believe that this wasn't just a case of attention seeking. I think what we have in the case of the Gardaí trying to frame Bailey is the unusual situation where the guards were desperate and were trying to set up a guilty man. As for Marie Farrell, it is very difficult to say what the truth is regarding her statements. I believe that she probably did see something at Cale Fodder Bridge that night, but her story has changed so frequently that anything she says has to be taken with a very large pinch of salt. As of the making of this video, a cold case is currently underway in regards to Sophie's murder. With DNA technology having progressed greatly since the mid-90s, we can only hope that some closure will be given to Sophie's family and that the truth of what happened on that fateful night will be brought to light. Rest in peace, Sophie Toscan du Plantier. If you made it to the end of this video, I would like to thank you for seeing it through to its conclusion, and if you enjoyed it, please consider dropping a like and a subscribe, as it would really help to get this channel off the ground. This has been my very first YouTube video, so I understand that it may have been a bit clunky. However, I do aim to improve, and I will have some more content out very shortly. Until next time, take care of yourselves and stay vigilant.